cocktail hour. This is great. So it's a restaurant group. How many chefs in the audience? Chefs. Any chefs? Okay, good. That gives me authority. So I'm a chef by background, and when I met my two founding partners at Shutters on the Beach, we were in a world that was filled with luxury and food that we loved but couldn't afford. And the foodscape in Los Angeles at the time, this is back in 2003, was, if you saw Nate present earlier, was split between high and low. High where we had existed professionally, low where we were budgeted, but it didn't appeal to our lifestyle. And what we saw between the two was blue water, open ocean of opportunity. And what we imagined in that blue water was a restaurant concept that offered the kind of food that we would cook for friends and family when we had an opportunity to go to the market, cook with love, things like a perfectly roasted chicken, a beautiful arugula salad with a drizzle of olive oil and a squeeze of lemon, a salad niçoise with a soft quail egg. And we believed that the lifestyle and the food that we enjoyed on our downtime could be shared with a lot of people, shared without compromising budget, shared in a way that fit into everybody's busy life. And we imagined a space that was reminiscent of a Venice beach bungalow, modernized, opened up, so that there was no barrier between the kitchen where the chef was cooking, the guests who were gathering around the abundance of food, the open format of the space leading onto a patio where there was an edible landscape. And with this idea, we put together a menu built around a farm and a 2-page vision statement that we called TYP. TYP stands for 10-year plan. Because as chefs, we realized we had a shelf life. Much like athletes, by the time you turn 30, you're burning out. Maybe you want a weekend off, spend holiday with friends, perhaps even start a family. So we took a trip up to Oxnard, California, 45 minutes north of Los Angeles, to visit Scarborough Farms. And with that, we pitched to them this idea. It was an invitation to scale with us, because we believed as chefs, without close, intimate farm relations, we would never be able to achieve the magic on the plate that we imagined. The Steins, fortunately, decided to invest. Nobody had ever asked them to partner in a concept. Now, they were farmers, so they didn't have a lot of money, but what they did have is a lot of lettuce. We had a lot of ambitions and dreams, not much money either. So we did a deal with the Steins that looked like this. With each new restaurant, the first $25,000 worth of product was converted to equity. And with each restaurant, they would build equity, and more importantly, a deeper and deeper bond with us. That meant that we would always protect the relationship with Scarborough Farms, and they would protect our supply chain. They also committed to making sure that that image of a patio filled with edible landscaping would be part of the Tender Greens concept, and that guests who sat on our patios would always have a connection to the farm. Nonverbal, but a deep, deep connection to the ingredients that were on their plates. And our chefs would have access to herbs and sometimes a ripe pepper to work into their daily specials. And as we grew, this model of partnering with our farmers and then bringing that to the identity of the restaurant space, whether it was through the patio design or the preserves or the pickles from the abundance of a harvest, became part of who we were. It was part of the Tender Greens brand experience. And through the years, our navigation of supply chain began to show up in the space. As we went into drought and contemplated expansion outside of California into colder climates, we started to look at controlled environment agriculture. That's hydroponics, aquaponics, grow systems that are able to navigate the cold, miserable climates of New York City and Chicago. And I have to say, standing here on stage with a beer in Miami, I am grateful for the climate that you all have down here. I am missing California desperately, now living in Williamsburg. But what we were able to do in those days was incubate small startup companies growing in shipping containers with grow lights, technology borrowed from the cannabis industry that was now coming out of the shadows with Colorado coming online and legalizing it. Others that were growing the first organic hydroponic systems in Encinitas, California. And a small startup called Local Roots that grew these towers behind me. And it was in these towers that we had an opportunity to bring some of the new systems that we were testing to the patio of Hollywood. An urban oasis in the middle of Sunset and Vine. And amongst the plants that Scarborough still provided for us, we now had 20 grow towers, each of them with 48 plants, making it about 1,000 plants that we could use in our daily specials, but more importantly, an invitation for our guests to engage, to eat next to the food that was on their plate, to connect. And in a world that is more and more connected and disconnected at the same time, the closer you can bring folks to the food without getting lost in the noise and the clutter of food's language, I think the more opportunity there is to go deep and to start a conversation with people about the importance of where their food comes from and why it matters. In 2015, we did a deal with Danny Meyer, the famous restaurateur out of New York City. You may know him from Shake Shack, but before Shake Shack, he had certainly made his reputation in fine dining. And with our partnership with Danny, there was this open invitation to come to New York City. Sort of a daunting idea with the occupancy costs and the challenges of entering that market. But what was also challenging was how were we going to replicate the magic of Southern California and Scarborough Farms on the East Coast, where the seasons are brutal and unpredictable, or let's say predictably bad. And we had been talking to a group in Brooklyn by the name of Gotham Greens. Their first facility was on the roof of Whole Foods in Brooklyn. A really, really smart relationship, not dissimilar with the one that we formed with Scarborough Farms so many years before. And because of our relationship with Scarborough and our new relationship with Gotham, we got the two together to collaborate on seed choices and plant expressions so that we would lose no qualitative difference between the hydroponics and the field grown. and also stay committed to always growing our food as close as possible to our customers, and also enjoying daily deliveries from the farm. But how do you communicate that to the customer? How do you bring the consumer, the guests, into that conversation and why it matters? The idea of urban agriculture and as a tool or a solution to the growing challenges of feeding 9 billion people in urban environments. So we met a group also in Brooklyn at a new labs in the Brooklyn shipyard by the name of Farm Shelf. And what Farm Shelf offers, much like the towers behind me, are these double-door units about the size of a reach-in cooler that allow us to follow from seed all the way to harvest in one unit. They have cameras, they have sensors, everything's controlled and optimized for each ingredient. That matters because it's climate agnostic. It means you can grow it anywhere in the world. You can grow it in the basement on 20th and Broadway. You can grow it in the middle of the restaurant on a cold February afternoon in New York. And as a means to engage the consumer, the distracted New Yorker who walks by busily on Broadway as they pass our restaurant and they see the lights from the growing chambers feeding these plants, we oftentimes see them stop. And they come in and they pause. Sometimes they take a camera. It's how we share with the world these days. And if they look closer, what they find is an experiment. It's not just lettuces, but on the little labels on the tags are these lettuces that we have gathered from the seed vaults and a partnership with the Crop Trust, which is an organization centered on preserving the biodiversity and the seed stock of the planet. Now that seems really esoteric, but it's important. And it's important because as our world becomes industrialized, and as we get most of our calories from just 4 ingredients, 60% of the calories we consume come from four ingredients. And yet, there are 150,000 different varietals. And it's really hard to start that conversation without a squirrel, a visual cue that stops people in their tracks and invites them into a conversation. And we've done that through Farm Shelf and these Jurassic seeds. And once we have the attention of the curious consumer, then we can go deeper into a Portlandia-like dive into what role all of our behavior has on the future of things and everything that we care about. I believe that chefs are at the center of the conversation around food. We are the controllers of the supply chain and the curators of food culture. And I think where we can find these moments to cut through the noise of food and invite folks into the magic and the complexity of things with absolute honesty, we can begin to reshape the future of food through our design spaces, through our menu development, and most importantly, through our supply chain. And if we can change the direction of food towards something that is more resilient, more nutrient dense, more biodiverse, and ultimately healthier for all of us, then we can change the world for the better. And with that, I just hope that tonight, as you make your food choices, you think about where your food comes from and who brought it to us and what role you all have in shaping the future, not just of food, but our planet. Because every day we have 3 opportunities to vote the future. And if you make the decisions that are good for the environment and health and culture, then we all are participants in shaping this better future. Thank you.